What is up? What is up, Miss Villagers? It's good to see you guys. This is an unscheduled live, and the reason is I just did a really fun Q&A for Fold, which is a diversity convention in Canada for writing, and there were a bunch of questions, and I said that I would hop over here to see if anybody wanted to ask anything. So this, and because last time we did a Q&A, I guess yesterday, a bunch of you guys were asking if I was gonna ever do like a writing thing. So this will be like from me with my author hat, I think, for the first time on the page, in case anyone had aspirations as such. If not, if they don't hop over here and ask questions, and it'll just be me seeing you awesome sexy people and saying what's up. Yes, Marquis, margaritas are amazing. Hello, Stephanie Amber. And what's up, heyo, Nick Johnson. So far it seems like just the Miss Villagers, which is more than enough for me. But yeah, like this is an author Q&A kind of thing. If you guys ever had aspirations and stuff like that, I'll rap about this until my battery dies, which could happen. I don't know. I've got this whole like setup going on where it's plugged in and like my wallet's propping it up on this side. Like I'm actually like kind of happy about this whole MacGyver thing that I just pulled off. But yeah, so Chris is here. This is his first live he's ever made it to. No real. So weirdly, this is actually the first live where I'm putting on my author cap to cover my now shortened curls, because I was just doing that Q&A for whatever. So yes, it is your birthday, Mitch Van Winkle, you bearded magnificent man. Okay, so we have our first question. So Adam Moody says, how do I get over the dreaded writer's block? Writer's block has never really been a thing for me, such in the way that other people describe it, where you're like, I don't know what to write. For me, it was like sort of like, it was like writer overload. It's like I didn't, like, before I even wrote the first book, I had like 8 major plot or well, let's be honest, 5 major plot points to get to, and honestly, we haven't even got to the first like big, oh my god, what's gonna happen next kind of thing. So like, it's not the writing that was a problem. It's life stuff. You guys know that I've had some losses in the family, and then the transitioning and other things that have happened, and it's just sort of like, when I was writing the first 6 to 7 books, I was writing it because it was a release from the stress of medicine and everything else and blah, blah, blah. And they were kind of fueled by like anger and frustration. And then I became happier in life. And it's like I had to switch, from a Hemi to like a hybrid. And the fuel source was a little bit different, and honestly, that's why it took 8 so long to come out. I mean, it still wasn't that long. I wrote 2 books in 2 years. God's Eye is about to drop as well, but obviously shorter than I was writing, because before I was writing a book every 6 weeks, and that's been really good for me. But it was a transition getting to this new phase of life. But I would say that, like, if you feel like you're forcing it, just stop forcing it. Go get a beer, go on a date, go take a hike, whatever, and just see how stopping, like, forcing your brain to do something allows your brain to do things. Okay? All right, so I hope that helped. All right, man, my mouth is already dry. Okay, I'm going to scroll back up. And again, this is mostly, I love all you Miss Villagers, but this is mostly a carryover from a writer's workshop that I just did. So I'm going to mostly answer those. Of course, I'm going to say hi to Chris Litta, my boy. What's going on? And Cooper says, how do you be a Miss Villager? You are a Miss Villager, Cooper. All right. Shay says, it's hard being a trophy husband. Hey, man, this ass won't quit. It's not that hard. All right. So Connor says, I already answered the question. And all right. Let's see. Stephanie Amber says, have audiobooks of short stories or flash fiction ever been successful? I mean, they definitely have been. You don't even have to guess. You can go on Amazon.com and then click on the Audible icon, like when it says, like, do you want an ebook, paperback, hardback, blah, blah. Click on the Audible icon for that, and it'll tell you the rank of the book, of those books, right? So if there are books like that you've seen, and if you haven't, you should research it, because that's how we make sure that we're doing, better things in marketing. But you can click on it and see, like, where they are. Now, if they've been out for a while and they're still doing well, that really answers your question, because it's not easy for a book that's been out for years. And especially if they're out new, just Google that person, see what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. But I will tell you that as far as Audible's algorithm, the author does not get to set the price. The price is just set by number of hours it is. So if you are 9 hours and 59 minutes, you are going to make less money than if you are 10 hours and 1 minute, just because they break it up by hours, and that's just the nuts and bolts behind it. Man, I never really talk about this kind of stuff. All right, let's see. Phil says, what kind of research do you do for your books? Everything, dude. Everything. I have running correspondence going on with graduate students and professors about various things, everything from physics to, medieval literature. I have built catapults out of balsa wood, testing, trying to figure out, like, the tensile strength of stuff. I have just gone for, like, walks around the city, like, gone down, like, alleys, happily wasn't beaten up, trying to, like, figure out how things, like, work out. Immersing yourself in a setting will bring to mind details that can flesh out your story, like, man, I hear this one kind of bird. That's a little bit different. Man, there's this smell that I didn't really expect before. Man, this is just sort of like something that I wouldn't have really thought about talking about, how much my feet hurt and how I'm hating on the other guy that's running from the monster that's got sneakers on. Maybe that's a reason that I might kill him later, because why did I buy cowboy boots for the first time? I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that you can be inspired. I mean, I'm wildly inspired by just, like, looking at really cool artwork, like everything from, like, classic stuff, going back to Michelangelo, to, like, really cool stuff they're making for, like, Diablo 3, like that trailer. If you guys haven't seen it as a segue, you should really check out, because it is sick. So, like, I mean, it's everything. Like, when you're creating a book, you're creating it from the sum total of who you are. And if I think, for me at least, if you let that flow and expose yourself to more, right, then that research can be clarified as anything that you're doing that can breathe life into the page. So I hope that helps. All right. So Mark said, how far ahead do I plan arcs like God's Eye? So I did not have God's Eye planned when I first started. All my arcs were basically in the land, looking at, like, sort of Richter's main story for the most part. But as I'm writing, and as, like, I'll watch a movie, or as I'm reading something, I'll have an idea, and then I'll stop everything I'm doing and flush out, like, an outline for that, or just flush out, like, a really cool scene, or blah, blah, blah. And so I've got, like, probably, like, hundreds of pages of outlines and stuff like that for other, stories, because as I'm creating, I find that that's when I'm most creative. I don't know if that's redundant, but it's like my mind is able to, connect to other things. And, like, when I read a really, really cool story, I'm like, oh man, that reminds me of, this, like, 11th grade class that I took about blah, blah, blah. And I thought that was really cool. And then so I'll, buy a book about, like, old African proverbs and look at Anansi, who, the trickster god, which, they also, put into American Gods, if you guys want that reference. But it's like, it comes from everywhere. So for God's Eye, I think I started, like, thinking about that probably, like, around the end of book 5 or the beginning of book 6. But it's also, like, I don't know, probably, like, the 7th other major work that I wanted to get started in. But I just kind of got more excited about God's Eye. And so that's why I'm going with this one. As you guys know, there will one day be a Ballad of Roswan, and again, the cover will just be an awesome, awesome mustache. So, hope you like that. All right, so for all of you awesome Miss Villagers that are here, the reason we're doing this one, this impromptu Facebook Live, is that I just finished doing a talk for ACX and Fold, which is a diversity convention for writers in Canada. So this is going to be more about, like, authoring as opposed to just awesome Miss Villagering, just so you know. Phil says, how did I start my own publishing company? I'm guessing you mean publishing company. So making a company in the US is super simple. Just, you can actually do it without a lawyer, though I always recommend hiring a lawyer. And you just make a company. That's it. And then you pay like 25 or 30 bucks a year and the company stays live. So that's what you're asking. If you're asking how I became successful in these books, well, it was basically working a second job, nonstop hustle, trying to, connect with people, coming up with cool ideas, looking at what other successful people were doing, see if I can adapt that, and honestly keeping the trolls at bay, which was half of the effort. I mean, at this point, like, we've killed most of them, and they're out there in trolldom still, spouting troll BS, but it took a really long time to, weed through that and find the right way to interact with people. And I got lucky enough to have awesome people that have my back, like you Miss Villagers, like my mods, like Geneva, and that's how that happened. So I don't know if that was like your question, but yeah. Okay. Let's see. Chris says, what is the hardest part of creating the world for your characters? I think the hardest part is getting out of my own way. If you're worrying, I was talking to Mark Sullivan, who wrote Under the Red Sky, which is an amazing book if you haven't read it. Definitely not LitRPG. But I think he's the most sold author on Amazon, at least last year. Really, really funny guy, unintentionally so. But one of the things that he told me, which is true, is that they have looked at the areas of the brain, right, that have creativity and have fear. And they have found very clear correlations that when the fear sector is activated, the creativity section bottoms out. And when the creativity is high, the fear sector has to be low. Think about all the times that you wanted to get started in something and then you started thinking about like all the things that could go wrong and you just didn't do it. Life is about just putting your, balls on the wall and just powering through and hoping that it works out. So the hardest part is getting my overactive mind out of the way and just hammering it out, and then later being surprised, like, oh, that actually was kind of funny. So yeah. Zach says, how do you stay motivated? I tend to lose motivation whenever I story build. I would say the same thing. Cut yourself some slack, enjoy the process, get drunk if you need to, whatever it is that you need to do to still your mind. I think it's a really interesting idea that basically we have evolved enough to do amazing things and not evolved enough to keep ourselves from stopping from doing amazing things. So I think that depending on what the kind of person you are, right, you have to combat the thing that is overriding. Like if you are overly introspective, you need to combat that, because if you cannot engage with the world, you will always be somewhat limited. If you are overly extroverted, right, you have to combat that because you need to be able to sit your butt down and do some writing. So whatever the details are of your personal journey, it's a personal, solution. But at the end of the day, again, I think it comes down to like, if you just let go of the fear and just like put it out there and have a little bit of fun, then it'll work out ideally. So, all right, let's see. Valerie says, when it comes to prompts like quests and games, do you write them? I write them in the first draft and then have no compunction with rewriting them, changing them. That's actually one of the things that takes up the most time for me, is which information to include, which information not, the best way to do it. It's a lot easier now, so that Amazon lets you have like color-coded boxes and then other things like that and blah, 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 unless you're reading on a Paperwhite, sorry. But, yeah, so I mean, but that's a minor thing. All right, so Devin says, how do you draw inspiration for places and characters? It's important. My nephew's name is Kai. My niece's name is Haley. That's why there is Kailand, which is one of the neighboring kingdoms on the River Peninsula, and why Haley's Rest is the capital. There was a super skeezy bar named Electra. That's why Electra's the name of a super skeezy city in the land. I have a friend, Eve, and she's married to my buddy Lawrence. That's why Eve is a, very powerful country, and Lawrence is the capital. Because honestly, she bosses him around a little bit. So, you draw them from anything. For me, it's like, again, the more you live life, the easier that is to do. Mike says, how do I get over the urge to over-describe? If I feel like I'm getting bored, I've done too much. If I feel like, I will definitely say that one of the things that I have an over tendency to do is to info dump, and then on editing, I'm like, yo, this is not as much fun as just, because like, you never want to tell, you want to show. Now, some of that's inevitable, right? But if you're doing it too much, then it kind of ruins it, and like, you want to sort of like, trickle out the lore as time goes on and leave hints to things so that people can wonder. I'd say that's more of an art than a science kind of thing, and you just got to try to call yourself on it. Elliot says, how do I find time after a long day's work? So again, I am full-time writing at this point, but when I was working as a physician, writing was my release, right? It wasn't something that I had to do. It was like, okay, I've seen horror and death and whatever, blah, 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 whatever the shit threw at me. And now this is where I can just, make some funny dick jokes and, have buddies punch each other while they're running from monsters. If you are having a good time doing something, it doesn't feel like work. I'm sure you guys have all heard that before. If you're not having a good time with your story, then you need to switch some things up. That's it. All right. Let's see. I want to again. I'm going to be just focusing on the writing kind of questions. I appreciate you, Connor, for your wonderful words. You're awesome. But yeah, this is just a carryover from anyone that came. I don't know if there's anyone. If you're here from ACX, let me know. Otherwise, I'm talking to my Miss Villagers, and that's so awesome. But yeah. Sometimes I run an issue being able to color my world for my characters. So Austin's saying he's having an issue coloring his world. I'm guessing you mean like fleshing out your world, adding relevant details. Again, just live, life. Like, if you've never been to the Arctic Circle, you're gonna have a hard time, writing about it. But watch a BBC, video about it. If you're talking about being in a bar, hang out in a bar. Like, see, what you're gonna be doing. Some of the best ideas I have for things is like, just sort of like BSing with my buddies. I mean, they're never really intentionally funny, but me laughing at them is hilarious, and then I try to find a way to incorporate that or shift things around for the story. So I hope that helped. Chris says he has a hard time writing dialogue. How do you deal with dialogue so well? Well, thank you very much, Chris. I try to write a character that could be like anyone else we know, right? And I will say that while I try to find the initial motivation and like who the character is in my mind, without putting it out there almost all the time, and then as I think about what that person would do or someone similar to me, right? I might base it on like, a story they told me or like someone like interesting that I know. I'm like, well, what would that person do? And that's what allows for me to get through the first couple interactions. And then as it goes on, you will find it's really interesting that your characters start coming to life in your mind, right? And it gets easier to say it. There's even be times where like, you're thinking that the conversation is going to go one way, and as you play it out, you're like, no, the character would say something else, and you arrive somewhere new, and that gives an authenticity that I think comes across in the page. So yeah. So Dean Lee says the UK is getting the worst of it. I don't know what you mean, buddy, but I hope you're staying safe. All right. Kyle says, do you ever hide pivotal characters that haven't been introduced yet in plain sight? I absolutely do. I personally love big reveals, or I'm like, and I love Easter eggs. I think you guys may have figured that out from my work. So yeah, I absolutely do that. A lot of it is planned out, and sometimes I just, when I'm like reviewing things, I'm like, what would be really, really cool, and I allow myself the freedom to abandon or change a storyline if it works better. When you talk about writers, you generally say, are you plotters or are you pantsers? Meaning, do you plot everything out 1,000%, or do you fly by the seat of your pants? I think most people are somewhere in the middle. I feel like I'm maybe dab in the middle, because again, I always have an idea about where I'm trying to go, right? I'm trying to get from A to B, but almost always it is not a straight line. As I'm creating it, it meanders a little bit. And every once in a while, I'm trying to get from A to B, and I'm like, you know what? It is much more real to get to C. And I think that makes a more honest character, especially in LitRPG, where you need to be accountable to the numbers in the game system, rather than just being like, and then he dug deep and was able to beat the guy, right? You're like, no, you only had 5 HP left, so what are you thinking? I think that being held accountable to things that are in the story and out of the story will come across in the page. Okay. So Jordan says, do I have any sort of program? Excel sheets, dude. 1 billion Excel sheets and Word documents. So Ricky says, do you have Japanese culture or language influence in your life? So I am part Japanese. My name is Aleron Kiyonoriko Yoshikong. And so, yeah, I mean, definitely the sprites and a lot of that is indicative of, Japanese culture. Some of it very strictly so. Other parts that I just thought were really cool. Other parts that I thought, would be a great addition to Samurai Jack. Yoshi was one of my uncles. He's an amazing guy. Koichi is mentioned in there. He also was one of my uncles. So yeah, I'm glad that comes across. All right. William says, how do you pick character names? Again, just from life, from cool things, from sometimes things that I feel are going to be foreshadowing. But I gotta say, one of the things is, do not just hold rigid to just one thing, it makes it boring. You want people to feel engaged. You want people to be stimulated. So if you always have foreshadowing, it's like, all right, well, here's some more, right? But if it's sometimes there and sometimes just a funny dick joke, then it makes it more fun. All right. So Kim says, have I thought about short stories? I definitely have. I have a bunch of those written out. I definitely could do Randy's backstory, though that would not be the first one. Rose Swan would definitely be the first one. And so, yeah. Aaron says, am I going to watch the Holy Trilogy tomorrow? Please let me know what that is, because I don't even know, Aaron. What is the Holy Trilogy? Helene says, my work needs to be translated into French. You will be happy to know that I'm now talking to a foreign rights agent about translating it, and hopefully that will be happening sometime soon. Jeremy, what's up again? Let's see. So Leslie says there are so many adventure hooks left over from the Land timeline. There could easily be more 6 more books. There are. And that is very intentional. I have not created any storylines in the Land that were not already accounted for. And honestly, it's one of those things that I think some people love and some people hate. For me, it's so much more realistic for someone to be engaging in a new world and not to be able to tie everything up, right? To not have it just be like a shotgun, like boom, 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 but instead be like, oh, I found this amazing thing, but real life is happening, so I haven't been able to get to it yet. I did that because that's the kind of realism that I think would come through, and I enjoy writing that story. For other people that are just looking for a resolution, I get how that is frustrating. But again, if you're just looking for a quick resolution like a Lord of the Rings, this is probably not the right story for you. So yeah. Chris says, do I create an outline? So I feel like I've already answered that. Alex, glad you're here for a live stream. Unfortunately, this one is mostly on mechanics, nuts and bolts. Again, if you were from the ACX presentation, please sound off. I don't think anyone came, but I'm happy that I can answer your questions. And Oki O'Connor, I feel like I just answered that. Nick says, what is the character creation process? Again, I think about the motivations, the pivotal things that happen in a character's life. I will sometimes meet people that I think are really, really interesting, or like see a really interesting character like in an old movie or something like that, and think like, okay, how would that person interact? And through an amalgam of those things, they will slowly flesh out. And I think that I would be really amazed if there were authors that said that they were not surprised at all by their own characters as their characters developed. Because I would just think that their minds must be just top-notch amazing. Let's see. Mike says, how do you write a believable character who's drastically different from yourself? Again, if you know someone like that, you could think like, well, what would, Ashley do or something like that. You could think like, what would I be like if this pivotal thing had happened in my own life, and then try to bring that through. But I think that the answer to the question you're asking is like, just try, do your best. Somebody asked me the other day if I would write a trans character, and I was like, probably not, because I don't really know too many trans people. And while I know plenty of like, homosexual people, men and women, or however you self-identify, and have definitely seen, variations of those kinds of personalities to come through, and have definitely seen the characterizations that are making it in film that are sometimes horrible and sometimes really funny. I feel like there's something I could bring into one of those characters, but not really understanding something so much, I would have to do a bunch of research to have it have any validity at all. Otherwise, you're just shoehorning to, I don't know, like hit some quota or try to appeal to somebody just for like namesake. I think people can generally tell if you have invested something real in something, or if you're just shoehorning it in. So yeah, I mean, you have to base it on who you are and who you know and the things you've been exposed to. So if you're having a hard time, expose yourself to whatever that character is more. If you're trying to write like about an old person, go talk to some old people, see what they're really about. I think there's a lot of really cool colloquialisms that come through, a lot of really casual like racism shit that was cool back then, that you're like, that might like really, everyone else in the room might be like, Jesus Christ, but it makes it so realistic because that's definitely the way my old grandparents were. And I was like, shh, we're in company, what is wrong with you? So yeah, that's it. I hope that helped. All right, so hold on, wait, what's going on there? There we go. So James says, did I start the series with an ending in mind? I absolutely have the ending. Hello to Shannon Frost. Sakura says, do you illustrate your own artwork for your characters? Absolutely not. I can barely draw stick figures. One of the most awesome thing about the era that we live in, though, is that we're exposed to people all around the world, right? So you reach out. I think that it's more important than someone's skills when you're working with like a artsy type, right? Is like the kind of person they are. I've definitely worked with artists where I'm like, hey, so I want you to do blah, 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 and they send me something that's nothing like it, and I'm like, yeah, but where is the details that I told you? And they're like, well, this was my vision of it, and I'm like, yeah, but that has nothing to do with my character, right? I mean, the number of times I've talked to someone and tried to get them to draw a Richter, and I'm like, yeah, but he's not blonde and blue eyes, he's a black guy, and they're like, I didn't really get that. I'm like, yeah, but I'm the damn author. So I would say just reach out to people. You know, you get what you pay for. Don't like, you know, I mean, an artist that has really good skills is worth you putting out some coin if you want to bring something to life. One of the reasons that there aren't thousands of pieces of artwork is that, like, I just don't have the money to make thousands of pieces of artwork, just, you know, since I'm an indie. But I do love pretty much all the art that we have, which if you guys haven't checked it out, go on LitRPG.com and check out the artwork section, because there's really, really cool depictions of some of the monsters and the characters and stuff like that. All right, let me so Luan says, I have some ideas I'm working on. So I really appreciate Luan, and I get that you're not a troll. For legal reasons, I cannot discuss the tenets of anyone else's story, even loose ideas, for the fact that, like, you know, what if you see something similar in my books one day and you're like, oh, Aleron ripped me off and blah, blah, blah. So I just have a very hard rule about that, something that I actually learned from the older authors like Anne McCaffrey and Raymond D. Feist when I was initially talking to them. So I wish you luck, and I'm happy to give general ideas that I hope flesh out, you know, what your story is talking about, but I cannot hear any specifics, so sorry about that. Duncan says, what inspires you to make a monster? He says, is it just whatever you sound cool or myths and legends? I will definitely say that cool is more important to me than anything else. But yeah, myths and legends and stuff like that too. And it depends on whether or not I just want like a monster that's like horrifying, or one with like a really cool skill, or if it's a monster where like the backstory is germane to what's happening, right? Like if you're fighting a monster and then later on in the story you're like, well, you know, that wasn't even supposed to be here. What's going on? Is there some sort of like, you know, shift from its normal habitat? Then, you know, you put more into it. But yeah, I would say that. Shout out from the Alvarados. What's going on? So Dave's asking about Mechanism of the Land board game. I'm not going to get into the board game here, but again, just join the Facebook group for the board game. There's a new thing every week, and it's a lot of fun, and you'll be able to figure out all that kind of stuff. All right. So Edwin's saying, will I have it translated into Spanish? I absolutely will. As far as audio narration, actually hit me up for if there's a narrator that you really love for audio. I obviously don't listen to Spanish audiobooks. I speak Spanish un poquito, pero muchos de mis pacientes en el hospital no hablan inglés, but like, you know, I know it still doesn't sound that great. So y'all have to let me know if there was somebody that you would really want to hear, but I'm definitely going to be getting it done. Josh says, is it wrong for you to listen to audio fully nude? And it's like, well, if you have more than 2 mirrors, you're doing too much. 1 mirror, just right. All right. Heather says, what do I appreciate seeing in book reviews? 5 stars. I do appreciate that. I do. I'm not above it. It definitely even helps combat the trolls that, you know, just put out the ones and make fake accounts and whatever like that. But I love it when people, you know, like let me know what's going on. Before I was a writer, right, I never really understood the importance of reviews. Or I was like, well, maybe he needs a more honest whatever, blah, blah. At the end of the day, the truth is, if there's a book with more stars, more people are going to take a chance on it. If there's a book with less stars, people are less likely to take a chance on it. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, always do you, but the same way, like, you know, you could 1-star a restaurant because your soup came out cold, but it's kind of a dick move, and it's not really changed anything. If there's something that's wrong, I would much rather someone just like shoot me a text or an email or something like that, and I'll be like, oh, thank you so much. If you feel the need to put it out there with a low star or something like that, I'm like, okay, well, you know, I can't shake that at all. But if you really just want to help an author that, you know, you're kind of mostly down with most of the time, leave some 5 stars. It helps a lot. So yeah. All right. Jody Barron says, what is better empathy as doctor or writing? I don't really understand your question. Obviously you have to have empathy, or you should have empathy if you want to be a writer. I mean, if you want to be a doctor, because you are healing people. For me, I was the kind of doctor that gave people what they needed rather than what they wanted. It's the kind of thing where I'm there to help guide you to the best thing that you want to do. There were other people that were like, I don't know, a little soft in my opinion, and didn't really get this best results. But to each their own. It depends on how you want to do things. As a writer, I'm like, the more I can mess y'all up, the better. So I guess there's not a lot of empathy there. More comedy and enjoyment at your suffering. So yeah. Richard Dowdy, I don't understand your question. You can write it again. Duncan says, do I typically base characters off people I know? No. Some are amalgam, some are totally new, some are, cool ideas about like other relationships that I've seen that, gather their own specific character as I'm writing them through, and yeah. Clint Sex, do I write out portions of the lore? I absolutely do. In fact, that's the thing that slows me down the most as far as writing this new series is making sure that the lore and the game mechanics and everything are not only solid for this first book, but will be solid for 7 books later. Making sure that I'm not shooting myself in the foot or making a system that is untenable. That's one of the hardest things about LitRPG. For me, when I'm playing a game, I love the grinding, but once I get too overpowered, it's like, why am I even playing? I'm super bored again. I feel like the same thing comes across in the books. If you have someone that like never loses, it gets a little bit boring, or someone that just has like a skill or a power that's like super nerfed. It's like, well, what are they even really going to do? So for me, yeah, I spend a lot of time. That's actually, I probably spend too much time and slow myself down too much, but I just try to make sure that it's solid. Let's see. Chris says, how do I keep my world organized and consistent? Reference documents, dude. Hundreds of reference documents. All right. All right. So Cooper saying, when is Gnome's Rule going to be reviewed? You look like a young guy, Cooper, but still, you're about to be pelted by shrapnel popcorn. That's because no spoilers. Tyler says that I base He-Man's character on a biblical reference. I was raised Christian. I am not a Bible reader. I think you guys have seen that I'm not a classic way of viewing things kind of dude. But yeah, I'm definitely influenced by some of it. But there was no specific biblical reference. He-Man was more about being honest about our society, right? It's more about like we all hope that people are basically good. I think that people are a mix. I think that you don't really know what someone's like until you see how they treat people that are beneath them, right? Like somebody could be super cool to you, but then you go on a date with them and they're super rude to a waiter. I feel like that's more indicative of who they really are as a person. So with He-Man, like, I laid it on like, thick because I really wanted to be like, clear and, elicit the reaction. And honestly, it was a very difficult thing for me to write. But I also felt like it was an important thing to put out there to be true and honest about how people would react coming into a new system where there was no accountability and they had power. So yeah, it was more of a commentary on today than on biblical references. All right. So Valerie says, why do I title the chapters? It's because when the first books came out, people are like, why hasn't something happened yet? And I'm like, dude, it's only been 3 months. And I got so tired of saying that I decided to just keep a running tally going of the days and the weeks so people would know that it's okay that he hasn't conquered the entire world because it's been 6 months. And, like, what have you done in 6 months? So, yeah. Andrew Dora, you're rad, too. All right, so, again, I'm keeping this mostly into, like, writing stuff, and I don't think we had anyone come over, so I am going to get off this soon because I need to pour some water for myself and honestly eat some lunch. Let's see. Jody's saying, doctor versus writing, please. Do I still do doctoring? No, I am a full-time writer at this point. But I have to give a shout out to all of the very brave men and women that are nurses, doctors, everything that are out there. Coronavirus is real. It is worse today than it has ever been. Georgia has opened up, and we had 1,200 new cases yesterday. Please stay safe. Like, for real. There's no cure. There's no vaccine. The only thing that has kept it from being like a plague, which, could qualify very soon, is that we're staying apart from each other. So please do that. I mean, I hate to have to like inject like, you know, reality all the time, but this is so serious. Please do it. So Garrett says that he's seen some Parks and Rec inspired characters. I have no idea what you're talking about, though Leslie Gnome will be coming around sometime soon. Yeah. All right. Let me. I'm scrolling through, seeing if there's any other righty kind of questions that I can answer before I hop off of here. Shannon says, how do you create names? Make them fun, make them cool, make them you know, referencey to old mythology sometimes. Make them sound like that as a red herring for people that never really fleshes out. You could even title your books in ways that have nothing to do with what the actual content of the books are. Some dickheads do that right here. So either way, I think that, like, for me, I want, you know, Indiana Jones. That's a badass name. And it is awesome that in the third one they say he was named after the dog. Like, you know, you want, you know, Jack Reacher. I mean, it's even a little sexual. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you want cool names, but I'm a dude. So, you know, coolness is very important to me. Yeah. All right. Let me see if I can answer anything. All right, so John, this is a good question. I can't expand it. I can only see the first part. But John Robert Perrin says, this is a bit nitpicky, but for a background in a history major, why don't characters use more? And I couldn't see the rest of your question. I think it's a really good question, because if you ever are holding yourself to the fire thinking, I am not being close enough to blah, 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 and you slow yourself overly down, you'll never get anything written. Anything that anyone has ever done can be picked apart posthumously. It's important to listen and try to do your best, and I do a lot of research trying to do that. But, you know, just get it done. And one of the cool things about ebooks is that if you really mess up, you can just, you know, reload a new one and pretend it never happened. So, yeah. All right. All right. I feel like I have answered most of these questions at this point. I don't see any more righty ones right now. Let me just respond to Jeremy Blanchard with a gnome's rule. Back to you, sir. Okay. So, you guys are amazing. This was mostly a writing one. I appreciate you as always. Stay safe. Peace, love. Perfect Margarita. Bye-bye.